Morning everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. We're heading up over the Allegheny front, going up north to look at a 98 Buick LeSabre, I think, 3.8 liter V6 that the customer said, started running rough, made it home, and now it barely runs. You have to like keep the gas halfway down to even keep it running. So I'm suspecting, gut feeling is he had an ignition misfire, then his catalytic converter melted and restricted the exhaust. So that's my guess, but let's get there, do some checks. I think we'll get the pressure transducer out to verify exhaust back pressure and see if we can at least diagnose it. We're not going to replace the cap for him, but he wants an answer. It's about a 2-hour round trip, and today we had a cold front come through. There's not much snow on the ground, but it's windy, it's cold. I even had to turn the 4-wheel drive on because the roads up here they just sand them, they don't salt them, which is I actually like. It's a beautiful snowy winter day. We'll get there soon. Alright, so we're on site. We're looking at a 1997 Buick Century 3.1 V6. So the customer information wasn't very clear to begin with. And this thing, it's going to be more interesting than I thought. Not a simple ignition problem. He said, they obviously tried the junkyard, parts cannon, ignition coils, ignition control module. They fixed the crankshaft position sensor wires. These two here. And this system, it's not like the 3.8 with the dual crank sensor at the harmonic balancer. Those two wires go to a crank sensor 7X signal that produces a sine wave that's mounted to the back side of the engine block. Impossible to get to. It's like over the transmission, right down there. Crazy spot for it. And then we have a 24X signal that goes directly to the PCM, and also a cam signal that goes to the PCM, not to the ignition control module like the 3.8s. So on the scope here, save a little time, I did a capture, and when you crank this thing, it sounds like it's missing a cylinder. It's like da 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 da, classic, right? Mechanical problem. Spark plug number 6, the customer said, was wet when he changed the spark plugs out. So I'm like, all right, let's put a cylinder transducer into cylinder number 6, pressure transducer. What do we see? We see something very interesting. So channel 1, crank signal. Channel 2 is ignition. I actually disabled ignition because the thing was cranking and it was like backfiring. Once in a while you get a puff of smoke out of the intake. So like the timing is off. It's just nuts. Channel 3 is that 7X signal, and it looks really weak. I mean, you can see a couple spikes, like right there is a good spike, and then it's weak, kind of there, and then it just goes to nothing. It's supposed to be 7X, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is, it's seeing something, but not. This is not a good crank signal whatsoever. No wonder the spark timing is off. Channel 4 is at the ICM again. That's the ignition control module sending signals to the PCM, because on this system it is a bypass system where when you start it up, the ignition control module is responsible for the spark. Then once it starts up, then the engine computer is in charge of the spark through the EST wire. And that signal, the yellow one, right now the ICM is disabled. I'll open up a capture where you'll see it's supposed to be reference pulse, and it was all over the place. But the compression on cylinder number 6, you can see it is sealing, but we see no exhaust valve opening, or maybe no intake valve opening. You see there's high vacuum, and then it goes up to 60 psi. It's just the piston's going up and down, but I see no valve opening whatsoever, intake or exhaust. How the heck do you explain that? So we have two problems. The crankshaft position sensor is not sending out a good signal, and something really weird is going on in cylinder number 6. This is a crazy Buick. We'll see where we go from here. So here's that capture I was talking about with the ICM enabled. So the spark, right there, it occurred almost at the right spot. And then all over the place. You can see the reference pulse from the ICM to the PCM is just complete garbage. Nuts. And when I was cranking, every other pulse was the the weird sound. So that tells me that on cylinder number 6 there's definitely a mechanical valve problem. So that's where we are. What would be your next step? Are we chasing a mechanical problem, and then we figure out why this CKP is acting weird? Well, let's get out the Snap-on, look up some in the component test meter what the CKP, maybe measure the resistance on it, see what's going on. Okay, Snap-on to the rescue. I have no cell reception, no internet here. This is our yellow and purple wire, back probing at ICM. It says the resistance should be 500 to 900 ohms, maybe slightly higher. So we can check that, and also we should see something like this on that 7x signal. You see the Hall effect goes directly to the PCM, the 24x. That has nothing to do with the signal that we're measuring. This one goes to the ICM. So the 7x, yellow and purple. Now you can see there's a 3x reference, purple, white, ICM to PCM. That's the one that was weird on the yellow trace, square wave. So this car really has major issues. We do not see this on the green trace on the 7x signal. So I guess there's a sync notch, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something. So the resistance on that CKP sensor is 887 ohms, which is right at that high end of the spec, 900 ohm spec. So there is continuity. We're picking up some sort of signal, but it's super low amplitude, and I mean, what do you make of that? I bet the ICM is just going nuts because the signal sucks. So the owner, he went out to his buddy's shop. They're going to bring a new crankshaft position sensor replacement. We'll plug that in, see if this thing starts and runs on 5 cylinders. Then we'll chase the mechanical problem. So I was trying to use a borescope to look at the push rods on cylinder number 6. Is this valve cover? It looks easy to take off, but it's not, because you have this coolant pipe, the hard coolant line in the way. You have engine mounts in the way. We could put the borescope instead of the pressure transducer in there and see if any of the valves are opening. But based on the waveform, I know the exhaust is not opening. That's definite. Now, is the intake opening? I don't think so. Because if the intake was opening, we would see a consistent peak. And this one, as you crank it, it either starts high and kind of drops down, or starts low and kind of goes higher. So that piston's just going up and down, then eventually reaches some kind of equilibrium. But, you know, how do you explain that? Did the camshaft snap off at the end? And it's not controlling the cylinder number 6 valves? All the other ones are okay. Alright, crankshaft position sensor, the 7X. I got the old one out. It was not easy. Get through the fender well here to kind of do the reach around move. And well, got it out. And what do we see on the tip? We see a mushroom of metal filings. That'll definitely interfere with the signal for this sensor. So the continuity we checked, 880 ohms, it was good. Now here's a brand new sensor from Napa, not a sponsor, and I'm doing a resistance measurement on that, and it seems to be, let's see here, 940 ohms. So about the same. So what I want to do, clean the tip of the sensor, put it back in, crank the car, see what the signal looks like, see if it'll start up, and then we have to figure out why number 6 cylinder mechanically is not doing well. Alright, here we go.
You think that might be from a lifter or something?
It very well could be something to do with the camshaft or the push rods or the lifters. I don't think it was touching anything. So there's the original, there's the Napa replacement. Let's put the sucker back in, see on the scope if there's any difference with the signal. So CKP sensor is reinstalled. Let's roll the scope, crank the vehicle over. Now the ignition control module is still disabled. Oh yeah, huge difference. Absolutely. So we'll bump the scale down here on the green channel, and look, now we're at plus or minus 4 volts. Before it was basically shorted out. Beautiful crank signal. So no parts required on that, but this is number 6 here. You can see that there's compression on every revolution. On a 4-stroke engine, that means you have a problem, because you're only supposed to have compression on every other revolution. So this car should fire right up, but it'll only run on, 5 cylinders out of 6. So I'll save this, we'll hook up the ICM again, and see if this thing, basically leave the pressure transducer in number 6, see what happens.
Open that garage door a little bit, or?
Sure, it'll probably make some smoke. Alright, here we go. So everything's plugged in, it should fire right up. Okay, almost. Let's try again. It's trying. Okay, let's let it sit for a little bit. See what we saw on our scope. Here's the first crank. So we definitely have spark. We definitely have the 3X pulse now, nice CKP signal. And the spark is occurring right around, right before TDC. Okay. Now you see the cranking, it's like you have 2 humps and then nothing, and then 2 humps and then nothing. So it's not an even cranking waveform. And here, again, we're close. So it's speeding up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you see the 3X reference pulse occurs between the humps of the CKP sensor. This is the ICM sending out signal to the engine computer for timing. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then we have 1, 2, 3. Okay. Just trying to get synchronized. If we put in a ruler, so this is 720, believe it or not, and our cranking cadence is, it slows down right here, it speeds up right here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pulses on the square wave between the, for 720 degrees. How many green pulses do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then this double notch. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Double notch, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see, double notch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Double notch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Double notch. That's almost like a 12x, not a 7x. Maybe that's just the way it is, but the car still did not start. All right, I'm gonna try again. It's close. Wow. I have it floored. Did it smoke a lot?
It's putting out a little bit of smoke.
Okay.
From what I can say.
So it kind of ran. Let's see what the waveform looks like when it was running. Wide open throttle. Man, this thing has problems. Alright, so the car actually started, wide open throttle, it barely ran. I mean, it's really, really not happy. I want to put the transducer in the neighboring cylinder, cylinder number 4, because we know 6 is dead in the water, but I want to see, is the timing for number 4 close enough, and what's happening during our intake stroke, what's happening during the exhaust stroke. Maybe the converter's completely plugged up. You know, there are other variables here. Let's move the transducer on the other cylinder. Alright, so number 4 cylinder now, pressure transducer, and also I got the clip on the spark plug that's grounded out. Let's see if we can get this thing to run again and look at the pressure signal on number 4 and see if, well, see what's going on here. There we go, and well, that should show us something useful. We got spikes to 120 and spikes to 105. Go figure that one out. Maybe that's not a known good cylinder. But right here we're at 0, so this is, man, this car is weird. What? So whenever you see a sharp transition, that's a valve opening or closing. Okay. Wow. But there's still 2 compression spikes for every crank revolution? That's impossible. Right there, there's a sink notch. Right there is a sink notch. And we got compression, compression. Insane. Okay, so what I'm thinking is on cylinder number 4, this is our exhaust stroke, and we literally have 120 psi during the exhaust stroke. Here's the intake. Intake valve opens. We're at 0. We're at atmosphere. And then we have compression going up over 140 psi. This is a wide open throttle. Coming back down. And then when the exhaust valve should open, right here, we're going up to 120 psi during the exhaust stroke. That's the only explanation I can come up with for this. Now, again, this and this, exhaust stroke is occurring on every crank revolution. I'm not so sure about that. This crank signal could be a little weird, meaning it did say 7x, so potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is really interesting. Alright, so upstream oxygen sensor, extracted that sucker. Here it is. So now, I want to see if it starts, if it, on the oscilloscope on the pressure transducer, we'll see if during the exhaust stroke, we're actually, going to drop pressure here. So this is cylinder number 4 still. Let's run the scope. Ready? Okay. Not exactly what we expected. The compression is still weird. So there must be a timing problem here. Wow. Alright, all the plugs are in. We're just gonna wide open throttle it and see if anything happens. Ooh.
Almost.
Yeah. I think it's running on 1 or 2 cylinders. Oil light is on. Misfire. This is the worst running engine I've ever seen in my life. Which cylinders are running on? Oil pressure. Wow. Was this worse than it ran for you, Kevin?
No, it's running the same.
This is how it's running?
Yeah.
On 1 cylinder? This is unbelievable. Alright, so I want to check the operation of this oil pressure light. Can we trust that? Oil pressure sensor, single wire, right here, And when I unplugged it, the light went out. So there's continuity, and I don't think we have any oil pressure, which is ridiculous. So I'm going to try to plug this back in. Oh, come on. If I can get that plug on. And we'll see if the oil light comes back on. There we go. Yep, it's on. So Kevin, you're right. Oil pressure light is not a good thing. Let's put a pan under it, take that filter off, do a visual inspection, and crank it over and see if it's shooting oil out or if we're completely dead in the water. Alright, so we pulled off the oil filter. Not much oil came out. Might have been a little sparkly, I don't know. But we're just going to crank it and see if any oil shoots out of the housing into the oil pan. Go ahead, Kevin. Nope. We're done. Zero oil pressure, you're right.
Oh.
Now why? The oil level is definitely good. We checked that. It's on full. Not good news for this 3100 Buick. So variable for pressure transducer testing. We definitely saw the valves weren't working, but why? The lifters collapsed from running it with no oil pressure. This, I'm sure this engine is toast. I mean, it's been run for a while. It kept getting worse and worse and worse. Either the filter screen's completely plugged up in the oil pan, so the oil pan has to come off. The bearings may or may not be harmed, but nah, I don't know. We need to restore oil pressure. We cleaned off the crank sensor, which had metal filings on it. It kind of fits the puzzle now. And yeah, that's where we are. So once we get an update, I don't know if this engine will be torn down or not. We'll get back. But that's it for this one. Unfortunately, parts will be required. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time. So, the crazy Buick Century GM 3100 V6. I'm wondering how many of you know what the actual problem is with this engine. We collected some crazy data, found some completely bizarre things on the pressure transducer. The thing had zero oil pressure. The crank sensor was full of metal filings. What is going on here? What is the root cause of this problem? So when I left the the customer's garage there, I told him, this engine is basically toast. You have no oil pressure. What is the root cause? Is the oil pump not spinning? Is it broken? We need to do a little more digging to see how this system is set up. What drives the oil pump? What can explain all these things at once? So Google to the rescue. Let's go on some GM forums. Just type in GM 3100 low oil pressure. See what comes up. Have other people run into this issue. Alright, so on all data, this oil pump design, it's bolted to the bottom of the engine block, pickup screen, oil pump, and this looks like the rear main seal, the bell housing, so it's at this side of the engine where it mates the transmission. Apparently there is a shaft that spins the pump, and that shaft engages into the block and is driven by, let's see here, this shaft that splices into the camshaft. It's bevel gear, so it's kind of an old school design. This is where the distributor would be if this was a distributor engine, but they just installed like a a dummy shaft in there that just spins the oil pump off of the camshaft. Okay, so that's the layout. The camshaft itself looks like this. So there is the gear that drives the oil pump. This is the harmonic balancer side and the timing chain side. Then I went on forums. 95 3.1 oil pressure help, 95 Lumina 3.1. My oil pump went out in November. I've replaced the oil pump pickup screen, kept the OEM shaft, also have replaced, I'm trying to get the glare out of here, the sending unit process, I replaced a bad coil also. So did he have a bad coil before his oil pump went out? Have the car put back together and still have an oil light. So this sounds very similar to what we have here. I have no idea where to go from here. Prior to the pump going out, I had no problems other than that coil. I did replace with an OEM one. Plugs, wires, replace transmission mount, blah blah blah, irrelevant to oil pressure. 92,000 miles, so pretty early in the car's life. Sat for almost 2 years, but was periodically ran. Okay. So here's a discussion. When the oil pump went out in November, how did you know about the problem? Was it just the oil pressure light? If it's below 30 psi, then you have problems with your bearings. Valve train noise motor would turn itself off. No longer has noise, just what appears to be a miss and an idiot light. No other problems prior to this. So keep going. People are, you know, guessing, giving suggestions, da 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 da. And then we come to post number 15, and it says, pull your front valve cover and watch the rocker arms as someone cranks it over. To me, it has the symptoms of a broken camshaft. When the cam breaks, the oil pump stops turning and some of the valves stop moving, causing it to miss on those cylinders. He recommends a 3400 engine swap. Cheapest, easiest, fastest, and best route to take. Okay, so broken camshaft. Is that possible? I guess that would explain a lot of our symptoms. Cylinder number 6, valves are not opening at all. Cylinder number 4, we saw the intake valve was opening, not the exhaust. So it sounds like, if we look at the camshaft, so this is the transmission side, there is the oil pump drive. These two lobes are for cylinder number 6, these two are for cylinder number 5, then we have a bearing, these two are for cylinder number 4. So if this is the intake lobe that still works, I think the camshaft is snapped clean in half right here between these two lobes. So this part of the camshaft is not spinning. That would disable cylinders 4, 5, and 6 and the oil pump. What do you make of that? I think that's exactly what's going on with this crazy Buick. You guys ever seen a snap camshaft? I guess I've seen a twisted camshaft, but holy crap, at 47,000 miles. So that blows my mind. Let's go back to the pressure transducer waveforms and see if this makes sense. Okay, so this was the capture when the vehicle actually started and ran, barely starting. So right here it's running. And what exactly do we notice? This is on cylinder number 6, where it just has kind of compression humps with no valve opening whatsoever. You can see on our crankshaft position sensor, this is the sync notch, and when the crank spins faster, you lose that double hump. It just becomes like a big, bigger hump. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So basically 6, including the sync notch. That's why they call it a 7x signal. So that is accurate. And then this yellow pulse is the reference from the ignition control module to the engine computer, and that is indeed, 1, 2, 3, 3 pulses per engine revolution, or 6 for 720. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So got that out of the way, and cylinder 6 is obviously dead in the water. Let's take a look at cylinder number 4, which was really weird. This really threw me for a loop here. You can see there is a valve opening right here. You get a nice compression, and then you expect an exhaust event. There is no exhaust pulse, it just compresses the mixture again. And you can see by the frequency of the reference pulse, or the crank signal, the engine is speeding up and slowing down. So this was a crank. It did not start. But again, you see that sync pulse is aligned with cylinder number 4 here and here. That's one crank revolution. One of them is compression stroke. The other one is an exhaust stroke. And the engine slows way down right here and then speeds back up. Slows way down, speeds back up. Why would the engine slow down right here? Well, because this is supposed to be an easy exhaust stroke, but it's almost like a compression stroke. So now we have number 4 compressing when you're supposed to be exhausting. And that slows the engine way down. It's hard for the starter to turn this engine over right at that point. And then it speeds back up as we do intake normal compression. So that's what's going on here. Keep in mind, cylinder 5 and 6 are completely dead in the water, and cylinder 4, only the intake valve is opening, so it's drawing in the mixture, compressing it, and then can't push it back out. So there's like a second compression stroke, second full compression stroke. It's just nuts. I mean, this is like the weirdest car, but that's exactly what happened. The camshaft snapped in half. So I just, couldn't really sleep until it clicked, wrapped my head around it, and then I called the customer. I was like, okay, I know exactly what's wrong with your Buick. Your camshaft snapped in half. You ran it with no oil pressure for a while on 3 cylinders. So the engine is junk. Regardless, engine's junk, but it's cool to see exactly the root cause of this. You don't see this every day, but you trust your data. It looks really weird and nothing like I've ever seen before. I know my transducer is not, lying, but how do you explain this? And then we have no oil pressure. I'm like, well, you look at the layout and the oil pump is driven off of the end of the camshaft. So that's the issue. I thought this was a really cool case study. I thought I was going in just for a simple ignition misfire, but those guys, they would have figured that one out on their own. So thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed that one. Stay tuned for more. Never a dull moment in this field.